It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee.
The poem is about a person who is describing an ever-flourishing relationship with a woman named Annabel Lee during her lifetime and after her death. In the climax of the poem, Annabel Lee abruptly dies and is taken away from the narrator. Despite the loss of Annabel Lee, the narrator still spends time near her grave and is still in love with her.
The narrator's love, Annabel Lee, has died after being brought with illness from heavenly beings. The narrator refuses to come to the realization that his love has died and continues to express the same amount of passion and obsession that they felt for her in the past.
The Romantic era, which lasted from 1800 to 1850, was a literature movement based on intense emotion, the appreciation of nature, and the emphasis of feeling over logic. Romantic literature largely was tied into themes of nostalgia, and also incorporated Gothic literature to represent a nightmarish world of intense emotion. Gothic literature uses components of the macabre, such as references to heaven and hell, architecture, and repressed feelings of pain and desire.
An elegy is a lyric poem that laments the death of a person or the eventual death of all people. Within the plot of the poem, the narrator's love, Annabel Lee, abruptly dies. He is then forced to cope with her death and her unforeseen absence in his life. The poem Annabel Lee is 41 lines long, which are divided into 6 stanzas.
Long E sound, as found in Annabel Lee, is repeated 21 times throughout the poem. Otherwise, there is no apparent rhyme scheme. Within the poem, there are 14 different sounds that are found at the end of the lines.
The narrator is unknown, and we do not know their gender nor age, but it can be inferred that they are male. In the plot of the poem, the narrator is deeply enraptured in an obsessive love for the female. Due to the conservative ideologies of the 1850s, it would not have been socially acceptable for a homosexual relationship to occur.
In capitalization throughout the name Annabel Lee, Poe is emphasizing who the subject of the rest of the poem will be.
In this instance, Poe uses a hyperbole to portray the extreme extent of the love between Annabel Lee and the narrator. Poe uses a hyperbole to illustrate that their love is not limited by age nor intelligence and is boundless. Poe uses the phrase demons down under the sea in substitution for hell. By doing this metonymy, he is continuing the underlying theme of the sea.
Quote describes thermal imagery. The harsh adjectives used to emphasize the wind creates a dark and seemingly dangerous image. The severity of the situation within these lines is indicated by the use of the negatively connotated words, such as night and chilling, to produce a distinct image. This line from the poem is an example of kinesthetic sensation imagery, also known as movement, with the use of the word dissever. The word contributes to the emphasis of the narrator's love for Annabel Lee, how strong their connection is, and how it will never be divided.
These lines detailing the narrator's actions appeal to the visual senses. The use of the word sea appeals to the auditory and olfactory senses. The location continues the familiarity and home-like feel of the rest of the poem. The use of the word tomb creates an image that conveys a continuation of their love even after death.
This line from the poem indirectly references the Bible, which holds cultural significance. The line alludes to the holy-like quality of the narrator and Annabel Lee's love, how it was strong enough to reach the angels. Their love was pure and innocent, similar to the angels who were immediately captivated.
As the moon goes through its different phases, it is a symbolization of eternity and immortality. The moon is also a representation of femininity and the rhythm of life, as it is a continuous cycle that never ends. In life, the heartbeat has a steady rhythm which powers the body, much like the rhythm of the moon cycles. By incorporating the moon, it creates a sense that Annabel Lee was the narrator's heartbeat and whole life. The moon is a symbol of the narrator and Annabel Lee's passionate love, as it follows a steady rhythm that is immortal and never-ending.
In this case, Poe uses antithesis to show how extreme the love was between the narrator and Annabel Lee. It depicts how their love is eternal and how it exceeds all boundaries of life because it is not bound to the conflicts of humanity. This portrays their love as being greater than the trivial components of the human psyche, such as the conflict between good and evil. This is a turning point in the poem, wherein the rhythm goes from peaceful and smooth to menacing. The clouds and the night foreshadow Annabel Lee's death, as night is often associated with evil and darkness.
Word kingdom, Poe creates a grand feeling like the world around the narrator and Annabel Lee is suited for their love. By using sea instead of ocean, he gives the poem a more intimate feeling, relating to the closeness of Annabel Lee and the narrator. Poe went to West Point when he was in his 20s. The architecture at the school was largely based off the castles and kingdoms having Gothic styles. Poe uses the word kingdom based off of his own experiences with these kind of buildings, understanding that they are large and grand. By using his past experience, Poe draws upon the palatal feeling that the setting can create.
Poe uses dissever, which means to separate or remove, to imply an agonized feeling to what the narrator is feeling about losing his love. This creates a more morbid tone, which correlates with the theme of Gothic literature at the time that Poe wrote the poem. This "my" multiple times to create an ownership of Annabel Lee to the narrator. By doing this, Poe creates a possessive tone to express the overwhelming amount of passion that the narrator feels towards Annabel Lee.
Poe's tone quickly changes with the death of Annabel Lee by the incorporation of dissonance. Instead of the smooth, rhythmic flow that it had before she died, it abruptly changes to contain harsh and jarring words such as chilling and killing. Since the two rhyming words are so close together, it creates the effect that their death was not foreseen and painful. Quickly after line 26, the tone of the poem is once again averted to the same rhythmic flow which it had prior to Lee's death.
An enjambment is used between these two lines to provide a continuous thought of who the narrator's dreams are of. The moon is a feminine symbol of eternity and immortality, which shows that as long as the moon arises in the night sky, dreams about Annabel Lee will be apparent in the narrator's mind. In the narrator's eyes, the love and connection between them will continue to live on, for as long as the moon continues to appear. Poe uses this to show how genuine the narrator's love is towards Annabel Lee through a passionate tone.
Within these lines, Poe describes the narrator's actions through a comforting tone. Poe provides a description of who exactly the narrator is lying down by. Poe uses darling, life, and bride to describe Annabel Lee and further how deep their connection is. If punctuation was added, it would ruin the comforting tone. The reader would not know who or what the narrator was lying down beside.
Poe is using a refrain to show that Annabel Lee was the narrator's whole life and further exemplifies the obsessive nature of the narrator. In the exposition of the poem, the phrase, "in a kingdom by the sea," is in correlation to the place wherein Annabel Lee lived. By line 14, 20, and 24, the phrase is referring to the setting in which Annabel Lee died and then buried in her tomb. In this case, Poe is using a refrain to show the development of the narrator and Annabel Lee's love after her death. Annabel Lee is said 7 times at the end of the line, also making it an epiphora. Prior to her death, Poe uses the word "my" towards Annabel Lee, which shows a possessive nature. After the death of Annabel Lee, Poe uses the word "the" before Lee's name, which shows the deterioration in possessive voice of the narrator. The narrator is still infatuated by her love and thinks of it in a positive way by calling her beautiful. Poe is trying to create a sympathetic mood towards the lost love of the narrator and Annabel Lee. Poe uses the word "sea" 8 times throughout the poem, ending the line each time making it an epiphora. The meaning of the word "sea" changes throughout the poem and further intensifies the imagery. The first 5 times Poe uses the word "sea," it is in accordance to the kingdom in which the poem takes place. This usage of "sea" multiple times is meant to give the poem an intimate mood, as the sea is much smaller in comparison to the ocean. It is antithetical for Poe to use kingdom, which has a grand-like connotation, but then follow it up by using sea, which has a smaller, confined connotation. In lines 31, 40, and 41, Poe's use of the word "sea" revolves around the death of Annabel Lee. Poe is trying to convey a more tragic mood from his use of the word "sea."
Poe utilizes repetition in the word "many" to stress how long ago the narrator dwelled upon the death of Annabel Lee. He uses the extensive emphasis on time to portray how long the narrator has felt the suffering for their love, and how this continues. Poe does this to try and create a sympathizing feeling. Poe repeats child in order to try and shape an innocent mood. By emphasizing that their love is innocent, Poe's goal is to make the reader believe that their love is pure, to sympathize with the narrator's loss. By repeating love numerous times, Poe is attempting to make a passionate and intimate feeling. By doing this, Poe is trying to create more emotion, such as nostalgia, so that the reader will relate to feelings of sympathy.
Poe uses a multitude of elements of Gothic and Romantic literature in accordance with varying literary components to emphasize the deep, obsessive love that is embodied between the narrator and Annabel Lee.
And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life, and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the side of the sea.